Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Brand Alchemy. Really excited to talk about our topic today, which is all about messaging. And this is actually a continuation of our class from 2 weeks ago. It's a two-part series. So if you haven't seen the first one, I recommend you definitely check that out either before or after watching this. So to get started, I just want to read this quote. And I've read this pretty much every time I've done a class because it is super important to understand. So the true alchemists do not change lead into gold. They change the world into words. So this is just really hinting at the innate power of words. And in the context of branding and figuring out our messaging, words play a very important role. I mean, in messaging, words are everything. So, just a little quick, we'll just back up real quick and look at the big picture. Every week, we've been going through bit by bit the entire brand alchemy process that I use to develop brands for clients, for myself, and helping you as well. So, it's basically a 4-step process, 4-phase process. Phase 1 is where we identify the strategy of our brand. It's basically just like preparation. So before we create anything, we want to get to the nuts and bolts of what we're doing, why we're doing it, who it's for, these sort of things. And then once we have our strategy, then we're ready to start actually creating some things. And we enter phase 2, which is the sprout. And that's where we're at now, which is part messaging, which is words, and part identity and design, which is the visual. And so those two work together to create the sprout. So once we have that all put together, then we get to phase 3, which is the platform. And that's where we build like a website or a product or content or, anything that basically gives form to the brand. It belongs in phase 3. And then finally, phase 4, once we have a platform, we have our products, we have things to share, the actual sharing of them and engaging with our audience is phase 4, which is experience. So we're going to zoom into phase 2, which is identity. And phase 2 has 2 components, which is the messaging and aesthetics. Messaging up top is really speaking primarily to the conscious mind, right? And then the aesthetics speak to the subconscious, right? It's like what we're saying without words, okay? And those two things work together to create the full identity of the brand. So we're going to focus on messaging, which is primarily conscious, and there's a little bit of subconscious stuff too, which we'll talk about here shortly. So essentially, this is how to create messaging in a nutshell, okay? It's just a 3-step process. We figure out what our core message is, like what's our story, what are we trying to say without being fancy about it, just what are we trying to say? And then we move to, we put that core message through our voice filter, and that's something that we covered in the last messaging episode, which was episode 6. So we take our core message, put it through the filter, and then out comes the branded message. So in the last, in episode 6, we focused on the core message and the filter and how to get clarity on those. And then today we're going to be focusing primarily on the branded messaging, which is like the final bits and pieces that might be on the actual website. So this whole process essentially is kind of like that, right? We're just taking a sort of core message that's like the white light coming in here on the left. It's not fancy, it's not colorful, it's just to the point and it's clear. And then the prism here is our filter, our voice filter, our personality. And then out comes, the filter, the personality basically creates a refraction of the clear light, and out comes color, right, and flavor. And that's what we're focused on now, is this rainbow part. So again, this was 2 weeks ago, focusing on message and core message and filter, and today we're going to be doing branded message. So just to kind of quick recap, and this is something we covered in depth. But we need to answer, or we covered this in depth in the last class, but we need to answer these questions to get to the heart of our messaging and our story. It's essentially, what is your story? Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? Who do you do it for? And how do you do it? These are all questions that we answer to clarify our core message and our filter. I love this quote. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. This is very true. And this is exactly why one of the key areas that we cover is the why. Why do you do what you do? And that really forms the basis of the messaging, because it's touching on values and beliefs, and these are things that motivate people, right? Products are kind of a souvenir, so to speak, or even it's really like we tend to, as humans, we resonate with story and narrative and emotion, right? Even though we think we're just buying the iPad, right? What we're really buying is a story that we're telling ourselves about what it means to be someone that uses an iPad. And that is more powerful than the iPad itself. We're going to actually talk about Apple and their brilliant use of messaging and what we can learn from there. So we'll get to that towards the end of the session today. So again, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and what you do simply proves what you believe, says Simon Sinek. All right, so in the last episode, we talked about this messaging framework, and this is essentially how we figure out what our core message and filter is, right? It's just this simple worksheet grid, answering the question of who am I and who am I for? What do I do? How, what's my vibe, my voice, my tone, my personality? How do I speak, or how do I want to speak and communicate? And then lastly is why, which is beliefs and values. So just as an example, this was my messaging framework, and these ones on the top are the ones that really stuck out. So the way this exercise worked is we just come up with as many ideas in a set amount of time. Like I would set a timer for each column for 5 minutes, come up with as many ideas as you can, and then pick the top 3 and move on. So who am I for? Powerful creators, conscious entrepreneurs, audio alchemists. What do I do? Brand alchemy, creative synthesis, experience design. I feel like I could actually refine those, because creative synthesis is kind of vague. How, what's my voice, my personality? Soulful, visionary, philosophical. And then why is cultural transformation, growth, and empowerment, and to live a more mythic and meaningful life. So another example, and this is for a current client project I'm working on. So who is it for? Knowledgeable philanthropists. What do? They do fundraising, research, and education, particularly in the field of mental health. How do they do it? What's their voice like? Honest, empowering, and human. And then lastly, what's their why? Why are they actually doing this? Because they want to revolutionize mental health care. They want to make a case and make positive psychology more of a thing, and to also freedom for all, because one of the things that they are aware of is that there's a lot of cases in the mental health realm where people are sort of forced into treatment. So they're working to change those things where appropriate. So that's the messaging framework. Again, we went through this in depth, and I showed you the whole exercise and how to do it in episode 6. So check that out if you'd like. All right, so let's talk about the voice a little bit here. This is a really simple yet profound quote, and this is just illustrating the importance of having the right tone, right? It's not about what we say as much as it is about how we're saying it. So Arnold Bennett says 10% of conflict is due to difference in opinion, and 90% of conflict is due to wrong tone of voice. That's quite a statement, and I know it to be true in my experience. All right, so essentially what this framework gives us is the who, the what, the why, and the how, and where those overlap and work together is branded message, right? It's our messaging. So again, and then what we get is this core message going through the filter, which is basically to say the who, the what, and the why, going through the how, and out comes the final messaging. So Rory Sutherland says, the human mind does not run on logic any more than a horse runs on petrol. When you demand logic, you pay a hidden price. You destroy magic. So this is something that a very common thing that I see with brand messaging, especially in like people that are just starting out, is that it's all trying too hard to be too logical often, and it's saying too much. And a lot of times I'll see websites that just have an insane amount of words and it's just TMI, too much info, right? It's not actually it's not resonating and connecting with the heart and the soul and the emotions of the person on the receiving end. It's basically just talking to their mind. Logic, okay? Not a very powerful approach when it comes to branding. So how do we infuse our messaging with magic, right? How do we make it resonant and motivating and sticky? So there's something called a poetic or literary device, and it's basically just a way of, when you think about poetry and how things like rhyme. So basically just having two lines of a 2-line poem and the lines rhyme. That rhyming is what's called a poetic device or literary device. And there's tons of different types of literary devices, but basically anytime that you see a message or language that sort of has like, it's not just like prose, it's not just saying something, like it's saying something in a sort of artful way, I guess is a good way to put it. And I'm going to show you examples of what this looks like here shortly. But essentially what we're looking to do here is like right here, on the left side, the white light, we're not trying to be fancy. We just want to get clear on what we're trying to say. Okay. And then we want to get clear on how we're going to say it, right? What's the sort of like the personality, the tone? Are we going to say it like, is our voice like inspiring and uplifting? Is it, kind of like calm and collected? These sort of things. So on this right side, when we actually are working on our final branded messaging, that's where we want to really get poetic and crafty and artsy with it. We're essentially making music rather than just writing words, okay? So Roy Sutherland again says, effective communication will always require some degree of irrationality in its creation, because if it's perfectly rational, it becomes like water, entirely lacking in flavor. A good example of this, and we're going to talk more about Apple here in just a minute, but Apple's classic tagline of think different. Like, what does that have to do with computers? What does it have to really do with anything, right? It's not even really, it's, you know what I mean? Like this is a good example of kind of poetic messaging, right? Or artful messaging, because it has multiple meanings, right? I guess if we kind of back up, what Apple's trying to say here, the white light aspect of it, is, people that use our products are unique and stand out, and they're not the status quo, right? They're also saying like that they're encouraging us to think differently, right? To change our mind, to adopt a new frame of mind. And they're also saying that our products, Apple products, are different. Okay, so there's multiple things they're saying, and they figured out a way to say it all with 2 words. That's art, right? That's poetry. Boom. So we're gonna go deeper into Apple stuff here in just a moment, but I do want to show you this. This is a very helpful tool when starting to figure out messaging. Okay, this is something it's called tone hierarchy, and what this means is that at level 1, this is sort of like the thing that is going to immediately grab people's attention. It's like the big text on your page, the big headlines, the taglines, the subject lines, like the big story, right? The things that draw you in. And those things need to be engaging, human, emotional, provocative, and poetic. That's exactly what we're talking about here. And that's the main focus of today, is this level 1 of the tone hierarchy. All these other pieces will come into play when you start building your website or, creating, deeper level messaging. But just getting the headlines down is such a great place to start. We can also focus a little bit on number 2, which is subheadings and preheadings, or even, So basically, like the little chunk of text or the sentence underneath the emotional headline that may not really make any sense, right? That kind of gives that headline some context and some meaning. So as we see, the subheadings and preheadings are directional and informational, right? So it just helps orient the reader. So in my mind, what these two do is that number 1 is really speaking to the heart and the soul and just the emotions. It's not rational at all. It's totally irrational, and that's how the magic happens. But then on level 2, it's completely logical and rational, right? So we have that balance of irrationality and rationality, and they work together to create really powerful messaging. The other thing I want to mention too is the relationship between messaging and aesthetics, right? Messaging nor aesthetics like exist in a vacuum when it comes to branding. Okay, it's like what we say and the context through which we're saying it, and like the colors that are surrounding it, it's all part of the message. And one way to look at it is that how it looks and how it feels, and like the design aspect serves to amplify the message. But the message is really the core piece, because it's the thing that we can sort of like grasp and lets us know if this thing that we're looking at is relevant to us or not. Okay, because if we have just aesthetics without a message, what's the point, right? So we need to have a potent message. We need to have something to say that's worth saying, and we also need to say it in a pleasing and beautiful way. Okay, so let's talk about Apple, and we're gonna go over show some examples. So again, we all know these two words, think different. And this was like one of their most like profitable campaigns, that they did. I don't remember exactly when they did this, but we all still remember it. So it was effective, right? All right, let's look. So I went and took some screenshots of their website. So MacBook Pro, the best for the brightest. Designed for those who defy limits and change the world. The new MacBook Pro is by far the most powerful notebook. And then, there's more below that. But wow, the best for the brightest, it's like they're not even talking about the computer really. Like it's these kind of vague platitudes that connect with something human, right? Because we want to be our best and our brightest. And what they're saying is that their products are going to help us get there, right? So if we look at this tone hierarchy again, you can kind of see how this plays out, right? So the best for the brightest, that's level 1, right? That's emotional, it's provocative, it's poetic, right? And then level 2, directional and informational, is the preheading. MacBook Pro, that's what we're talking about. It's right. So it's kind of like that orients us to know, okay, we're talking about MacBook Pro and then the best for the brightest, right? So then my mind goes, okay, what that means is that the MacBook Pro is the best for the brightest, right? And then level 3, which is the main body, the benefits, subsections, etc., is marked by the fact that it's conversational, it's detailed, and it's story driven or narrative driven. So again, we look at here, designed for those who defy limits and change the world. The new MacBook Pro is by far the most powerful notebook, right? Do you see that they're literally playing this tone hierarchy out to a T, right? Because that is, it is story driven, and they're including the who, the what, the why, the how, all these things that we were talking about, it's all here. I know who this is for. I know what it is. I know what they do, you know. I know why they're doing it. They want to, it's designed for those who defy limits and change the world, which also says that they are in the business of empowering people to change the world through their creativity. I mean, yeah, this is amazing. Brilliant messaging. Mac Pro, power to change everything. See the theme? Their users, their customers change the world, and their products enable them to do that. It's just amazing. So again, this is kind of going deeper into this. Let's say here to have it again, the power to change everything, and then it goes into the story bit, right? So we're going from this level 1 bit here, and then they've kind of made it a headline by making it bold. And then it goes right into the details in the story. So, say hello to a Mac that's extreme in every way, with the greatest performance, expansion, and configurability. Yet, it's a system created to let a wide range of professionals push the limits of what is possible. That's compelling. Like, it's speaking to my soul in a way that it's just relevant. You go to like a Microsoft or whatever, and like their whole, I actually should have gotten some examples. Their whole, approach is just the nuts and bolts. There's no soul in it. And that's one of the main reasons that I don't use Microsoft stuff or PCs in general. It's just the resonance just is not there for me. So here's another good one. Mac Mini. So there's that, the gives us the context of what are we talking about, and then it says re-engineered in no small way. And then they've got some little like lines underneath that kind of like back that up, right? They're not just saying this without any sort of like backing, but they're leading with that so that it like connects, it pulls the emotional heartstrings, and then it kind of gives us all this amazing info about this, the facts and the specifics of how it's re-engineered, right? Here's another one. So this is for the iPad. See the beauty in everything you do. So, I mean, again, there's Apple's absolutely brilliant at coming up with messaging that says multiple things at once. So it's kind of like, see the beauty in everything you do, just as like a kind of poetic platitude of just like appreciating life, right? But also they're sort of saying that by using this device, you're going to see more beauty in your work, which is to say that this device is going to make you better at creating. But it's all implied, right? They're not actually saying that. And that's why it's powerful, because it's implied, it's speaking to our conscious mind in the words, but it's also subconsciously telling us all these other things about how if you use this product, it's going to help you do X, Y, Z. So here's another one. I love this. So for their accessories section, make the perfect connection. You know what I mean? Like, it's just good. Like, that's just brilliant messaging. I don't even need to say anything about that. Moving on. Believing is seeing. So this is for their new $5,000 monitor. Right? And it's like good messaging in these poetic devices. A lot of times too is that they play with our expectations. Like seeing is believing is a kind of term that we all know, and they just tweaked it, turn it backwards, and then they made it relevant to their monitor. Super awesome. Okay, so let's do one more Apple example. This is kind of going beyond just headlines and getting into like creating poetry and story and creating advertising basically. So this was a campaign. I think it was like the most successful campaign that they ever did, and it was like a commercial called The Crazy Ones, and It was basically chronicling like people doing all these great things, right? Changing the world, innovating, doing just great human feats. And the idea, the whole message was basically that Apple was allowing them to do that through their products, right? So here, while the commercial was going, I wish I would have shown a video clip here, but let's just read it. So while the video is playing, while the commercial is playing, there's like a voiceover speaking these words, okay? Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of the rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify them, or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. The people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones that do. And it's just powerful, right? It's not about Apple. It's not about their products. It's about their why, right? Remember that quote, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, right? That's why this campaign was so important. They weren't showing off the latest processor and all this like stuff that people don't actually care about. What they were doing was that they're championing their users, their community. And they're saying, their why, their core value is, again, helping creative people change the world through awesome products and laptops and devices, right? So there's a you see there's consistency, right? Like all of these headlines, they all work together. They all fit. They're all consistent because they're all based on the same messaging framework, okay? So once you figure out your framework and your voice and your values, coming up with these messaging becomes really, really easy. And it's just kind of limited to your ability to come up with nice, poetic sounding things. And if you aren't that great at that, you can work with someone who is. All right, so that's Apple. Let's look at this one. This is a great example that I found in one of my brand identity books. And it was a case study showing how they created this brand. And I thought that their messaging was just brilliant. So let's look at that. So Primal Roots is it's a UK-based like gym that they don't have a gym. It's an outdoor gym. So it's like they basically just have this, you meet at, in the woods, and then you do your workout in the woods. Okay. And so they were figuring out how they can really like make this more attractive, because people are used to, going to the gym where, no matter what the temperature is outside, if it's rain or shine, they're going to have a consistent, reliable experience, that they're not going to get rained on. They're going to have a good time, that, you know what I mean? So one of the issues that they were up against was that they were worried that people would be diverted from this idea of an outdoor gym, especially on, during the winter months or when it's rainy, right? So I feel like that they really nailed the solution there. So here's an example of like if you go to their website, this is the first thing you see. Welcome to the gym floor. This is nature's gym. It's simple and it's great. And here's another thing too, is that, like I was saying earlier, when the visuals and the message work together, that's when we have something really potent, right? That's exactly what this is. It's like they're literally illustrating what they're talking about in a way that's kind of abstract but also literal, right? Like you're literally looking at the floor of the forest, right? Welcome to the gym floor. It's great. Aircon, naturally. Fitness with headspace, not headphones. Right? So they're figuring out ways of, turning, kind of spinning it in the positive, right? They're like, yeah, we have natural air conditioning. This is great. Sweat it out. This is nature's gym. And then they've got these leaves with what looks like sweat on them, right? So simple, but just it works. Another one, at home in the wild. And then they have their little, the story bit saying, working closely with homeless charities, healthcare commissioners, and local authorities, we offer fitness services and training to help the recovery of those who would otherwise not have access. We aim to offer employment opportunities as we grow and expand. So that's kind of a little bit on the boring side, because even when we do our like main body text, we still want to have our voice in there, right? We don't want to just revert to like factual, dry language, unless that is, what we decide is like how we want our voice to be, right? But I think that they could actually kind of flavor this up quite a bit. So here's a few more little bits. So better outside, better inside. And then they say stronger together, natural high, eat clean. And then they have little bits about, context of what they mean there. Another one, inspiring leaders, woodland home, run for the woods. So the thing I want to point out too is that these statements don't actually really mean anything on their own, okay? And and it's the context that gives it meaning. And I think too often we try to make sure that everything makes sense on its own, and so then everything just becomes freaking boring because it loses that poetic, artful touch, right? Here's another great one. Natural high, guaranteed. Right? It's again, that's another good one of kind of a double meaning, right? You're going to get a natural high because you're working out and you're outside. It's natural. Movement meets instinct. I love, like the word instinct is great. It plays in, like their brand name is Primal Roots, So you see how there's these themes that are going, and they're not just like pulling things out of nowhere. There's a consistency going on. All right. And then here's the last one, the great work outdoors. It's great. The great work outdoors. Love it. And so again, they're really following the I should bring this up again, the tone hierarchy. They're following it great, right? So just to kind of, number one is like the headline, and then there's like a subheading too that I'll show you, and then they have their main body text, and then they've got the call to action. I don't think they have any of the level 4, which is kind of more technical stuff. Maybe, let's see. So level 1 is the great work outdoors. And then they have this little animal instinct thing, which is just kind of like a little bonus. I think that's probably still a level 1. And then this is the level 3 right here, which is their main like little storytelling snippet, really giving the context of what we're talking about. And then below is the calls to action. They have 2. Okay, there's short, punchy, to the point. Learn more about our woodland workouts and team building sessions. Click. Read more about how we partner with charities and local councils. Click. There's no mystery to like what this is about and what I should do. Okay. All right. Primal Roots. That's Primal Roots. All right. I'm going to show an example of a project I'm currently working on. So this is a brand. It's a complete brand overhaul. And I'm actually finishing the identity system tomorrow. So I'm really excited to share the case study with that. Full case study when it's ready. But I just want to share some of the messaging bits and pieces that I created for them. So just to kind of dive in, we'll just start here. So the archetype. We talked about archetypes in the Essence episode, which is episode 3. The archetype that we went for with them is the revolutionary sage. Okay, I'm not going to get into what that means here. You can watch the episode 3 if you want to learn more about that. But this is kind of like it's like the role that they're playing in the marketplace. Okay, that's what the archetype is. Basically just their role. So their voice filter, right? I defined as powerfully human. And there's a few key words that distinguish it, but it's essentially like we want their voice to be potent and powerful and strong, and you know what I mean, and poignant, but also human. So there's this dichotomy of like powerfully human, right? It's soft and strong, warm and powerful, right? And then here's some bits starting to put it all together. So their vision, we had a whole episode on vision, which is episode 2. So here's their distilled vision is mental health care that honors the human experience and cultivates true well-being. So again, there's, honors the human experience, true well-being. Those are those human aspects. Mission, facilitate independent research, steward innovative programs, and share what we discover. And then finally, the positioning is open excellence enables philanthropists to fund independent research, innovative programs, educational content, and community symposia that revolutionize mental health outcomes. So those are just kind of the like more internal messaging, just for them to be clear on their vision, mission, and positioning. Because before I started this project, and even in the first few months of it, they had zero clarity on any of this. And it literally took me months just to figure out what exactly it is that they do. But we figured it out, and I'm really happy with the results. So I want to show some headlines, and that's kind of the main thing. And that's like the place that I always start, is coming up with headlines based on this process, right? So we figure out what the core message is, the core values, what's your filter, and then how do we say the core message in a way that's filtered, that's on brand. Okay, so we'll go back to this. So there's a concept we came up with that's like this. So here's one: hello mind, I feel you. So again, emotional, it's human, it's also there's a lot that it's saying beneath the surface. And then there's a few variations of this motif. Hello friend, I hear you. And hello wellness, I see you. So what these are actually saying, so this one is basically saying that like the psychology is not just a mental thing, right? It's a holistic thing, and we need to honor our emotional body, right, as much as our mental body. And that, that's one of the values that they said. And then so I said, okay, how do I express that in a headline that is powerfully human? There you go. Hello mind, I feel you. So again, hello friend, I hear you. What this was saying is basically that we do it together. It's a sort of, it's not like somebody that has a mental health issue goes and then they're just sort of like subjected to tests and then told what to do, and then that's that. I mean, that actually is how it's done a lot, and that's what they're kind of up against and trying to change. So what this is, it's basically just touching on this idea that like we need to include the patients in their healing process and kind of let them feel heard, right, and understood. And then finally, hello wellness, I see you. So this is basically just to say that like there's hope. Okay, we can create a better world. We can create a just mental wellness system, right? So one way to say that fits this theme is hello wellness, I see you, right? I have vision of a better future. So another one, human, right? So again, this one's touching on human rights. It's kind of also saying like, how are we treating people like this? This is insane, right? Human, right? Similarly, human at heart. Okay, so another one that's really one of their values was about choice, freedom of choice, letting people be more involved in deciding how they get treated. It's insane how many people are forced into mental treatment that really should not have been forced. So freedom first. And then here's another one too. I'm still playing with the exact wording of it. I haven't found the right way to say it yet, but one of the concepts that they wanted to say was that basically, so psychology, the word psyche, actually means soul. That's literally where the word come from. And the psychology, when it was first created, and for a very long time, was not the study of the mind as much as it was the study of the soul. Okay, and that isn't the case anymore. They've kind of lost the soul of it, and that's, in my opinion, why the system is so fucked up. So honoring the soul and psyche, or reclaiming the soul and psyche, or, I'm looking at basically creating some sort of a branded message that connects this idea of soul and psyche. Haven't found the right choice of words yet, but I just want to show you how I'm approaching this process. Here's kind of like a tagline, or it could be like a tagline or just like a statement that's kind of nice and catchy. It's actually inspired by Tesla. Tesla's mission statement is accelerating the world's transition to excellent mental health care. And their name's Open Excellence as well, so that ties in nicely. And I would say too that this statement is actually not a level 1 emotional and provocative statement. This is more of like a level 3 story narrative piece. Another one, beyond recovery, right? So what this is kind of saying is saying that like the goal is not to just get back to baseline. The goal is to create a system or a world of mental wellness and flourishing, not just being back to normal, which normal kind of sucks in itself sometimes. But the way the system is currently built, it's based around helping people get from a shitty situation to something that's just okay, bearable. You know what I mean? But we want to go beyond that. We want to ask the question of, all right, how do we not only be okay, but how do we flourish? How do we have like super healthy, optimized minds and psyches and souls, right? How do we go beyond recovery? So again, this could mean so many different things, and it can be used in lots of different places, but it kind of like sets the tone, it sets the theme. And then we need to create context using other bits of content or text to give it meaning, to give it more meaning. So another one is we have the power. So they have strong beliefs about that the only way we're going to do this is as a community, right? And that it's about not any one individual, but we have to work together to create a better world. So they want us, a way to say it is we have the power, which is, again, powerfully human, right? And then kind of another variation on that is the power of we. So all of these little pieces are kind of I created to form the framework or the foundation for their brand messaging. And when they moving forward, say after I'm done working with them, they are going to have all these as a guide for say they hire someone else to do messaging. Now they have a framework to work off of. Okay. And examples. So let me show you in context, putting it all together. Here's a couple poster mock-ups I made that weave in some of this messaging. Hello mind, I feel you. And this is just some dummy text for now, but it would be something that would create that context. It would tell a story, right? That's that level 3 in the tone hierarchy. And then here's another one. Hello wellness, I see you. And then I include their vision statement, right? Which is related to I see you, sight, vision. So that's that for the examples. So here's a great quote. Again, a brand is a voice. A product is a souvenir. And I think that this is an important point to understand, is that sometimes it's more how we talk about what we do is oftentimes more important than what we do. And it sounds kind of weird. And, we could argue on both sides, but let's just, for the sake of simplicity, let's just say they're both equally as important. Now, if you're just like doing something for a hobby, you don't need to talk about it. Doesn't matter. But if you're building a brand around your craft, then how you talk about what you do is just as important as what you do. Okay. Now, I made a kind of tweaked version of this that I like. So a brand is a voice, a product is a souvenir. I think a brand is more than a voice. A voice is how the brand speaks, right? But it's more than a voice. So I made my edit that a brand is an experience, a product is a souvenir. And in that experience, we are communicated with, So that's it, the messaging framework, right? So again, you're just clarifying what exactly are you trying to say? What are your values, right? Who is it for? Why? What is it that you do? Etc. And how do you speak, right? How do you want to show up? What's your role? What's the quality of your voice, your personality? And then applying that personality to those core bits of messages, out comes our branded messaging. And we use poetic devices and craft and creativity to make it interesting, right? Oh yeah, so I just wanted to point out, and then again, when we're working at this point, and it's this stage of the game, right? Like in the example of that Open Excellence project, like at this stage of the game, I'm just really focusing on this level 1 stuff, right? Which is just the emotional, provocative, poetic, human engaging stuff. And then sometimes I'll, put a little bit of info beneath it just to kind of like orient of like the, to give some context of what it means. And I did, like when I presented some of these headline ideas to the client, I had the headline and then underneath had like a statement of, kind of like spelling out what I'm trying to say using like an informational or directional statement so that they would understand, oh, okay, I get it. Because at first they're where they're coming from, they don't quite understand the value of a headline that, doesn't really like make sense by itself. But when you put it in context, it just amplifies everything. All right. Donna Miller says, in every line of copy start over. In every line of copy we write, we're either serving the customer's story or descending into confusion. We're either making music or making noise. Yeah. Let's make music. Let's not make noise. All right. So next up, turn your messaging framework into branded messaging, right? And you can use, focus on level 1 if you need to use level 2 just to like make it make sense and so that it, that it's self-explanatory what you're trying to say, then that's totally fine. So again, just to kind of recap on that, we want to start with this, do this exercise to figure out what is our core message and who it's for and all that. And then we filter it through our voice to create headlines. Just like this, right? Core message, filter it through our voice, create some nice, tasty, poetic, artful, musical headlines. And you'll be well on your way to having an amazing brand messaging system, basically. So what's next? Next week is going to be bumping that back down into the subconscious realm, and we're going to talk about aesthetics, and that'll be the conclusion for phase 2. And we're basically looking at how to turn a stylescape, which was last week's episode, into a complete identity system, which is like the logo, the brand materials, the cards, the posters, all that kind of stuff. And by following this process and doing all this work that we're on, this is week 8 now. Yeah, week 8. So next week is week 9. It's taken 9 weeks of this just to get to the point where we're actually talking about designing logos. And most people, when they're starting out with their brand, the first thing is, I'm going to make a brand, I need a logo. And it's like, Yeah, you do, but there's a lot of other stuff you need to be thinking out about first, because your logo is one little piece in a holistic, organism basically. Um, so I know it feels like extra work, but the payoff is on a whole nother level than if you just jump into a logo and and don't really do things the strategic way. And that's what brand alchemy is all about: doing things strategically, because strategy equals power. So that's it for this week. If you guys have any questions about any of this, I'm more than happy to answer. Just ask in the comments, send me an email, whatever. I'm at your service. And before I go, I just want to mention the collab. This is a private mastermind group that I've set up. It has a really amazing crew of creative humans doing awesome things together. So if you want to create your best work, refine your process, and grow your brand, this might be the thing for you. Definitely for me, like every time, I get a lot out of it myself. It's pretty amazing. So we do weekly sessions. We meet every Tuesday for 2 hours, and we work on our businesses together. And we've all been we've been getting a lot of momentum, supporting each other, and just getting tons and tons of clarity on how we need to move forward. So that's $100 a month. If it sounds like something that you are interested in or just want to learn more about, send me an email at Andy@Opulent Creative, and we can have a chat and see if it's a good fit. Well, that is all for this week. Thank you so much for taking the time and lending me your attention, and I hope this helps. I'll see you next week. Cheers.